this lesson, we're going to focus on our understanding of the unit circle with common angles. And those are the angles in which we have come to understand better, both through memorization and using the 30, 60, 90 triangle and the 45, 45 degree triangle as well. Let's start with 60 degrees. So where do we find 60 degrees? The first thing I would tell you to do is to have an idea of where does this land. So 60 degrees is going to land right about here. We also have to remember our acronym, All-Star Trig Class. And this tells us where can we find the positives and negatives for our trig functions, both primary and secondary. Primary being sine, cosine, tangent, and then the reciprocals, the secondary, being cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So sine, its reciprocal, cosecant. Cosine, its reciprocal, secant. And tangent has reciprocal of cotangent. Now when we identify whether the final answer for each of these is positive or negative, know that the sign, whether it's positive or negative, for the 60 degrees will have the same sign as cosecant, and cosine will have the same sign as secant, and likewise the reciprocal of tangent, they'll have the exact same sign. So 60 degrees lands in quadrant 1. Now I know in quadrant 1 all things are positive, so I'm going to start by just putting a plus sign in each one of these locations. Now 60 degrees, you've all been provided with a unit circle. Let's find 60 degrees, it's right here. Also remember the first value is our cosine and the second value is our sine. So the sine is 1/2 and the cosine, excuse me, I already wrote it down wrong. The sine is radical 3/2. Sine is the second number. And the way I remember it is that I was once told by a student, remember the acronym CBS, a television station. CBS reminds me that cosine goes before sine. So positive square root of 3/2 and positive 1/2. I'm going to come back to tangent. So I'm going to circle this. I believe these are the correct answers and they're in the correct form. Now I'm going to come over to cosecant. Cosecant, I need to take the reciprocal of this. So let's do the little work down here. I take the reciprocal, and mathematically that's not wrong, but it's not in proper form. I'm going to move this up top, and I have 2 radical 3/3. Now it's in proper mathematical form. 1/2, when I take the reciprocal, doesn't have a radical on the bottom. It's already in the correct form, so positive 2 or positive 2/1. How do we find tangent? So tangent can be represented as sine over cosine. So I'm going to write that down. We have the sine, and I want to divide by the cosine. When we divide fractions, we take the second fraction and we take the reciprocal of it. And we can see the 2 on the bottom and the 2 on top. You may think in your mind they cancel out, but in reality, they're going to simplify to 1. And I'm left with radical 3/1. When I take the reciprocal, I get 1 over radical 3. Mathematically, that's not wrong, but we need to put it in proper form. It goes up top, and I have 1 radical 3/3. It's not necessary to put a 1 out front. Okay, where negative 210 is. Well, positive 210 would be 3, so 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, and 210. So here's where positive 210 would be, but it's a negative 210. So I'm going to reverse it. Here's negative 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, and 210 would land right here in quadrant number 2. Now in quadrant 2, remember, all-star trig class, all-star, so only the S's or the signs are going to be positive. So this is going to represent the sine, this is the cosine, the tangent, and then its reciprocals. Okay, again in quadrant 2, all star. S represents what's positive. The S is going to be positive, so I know that the sine is positive and its reciprocal is positive, and all other trig ratios are going to be negative. Now I'm going to come over here, and this is at 150. We'll have the exact same marks. So when I'm going to identify the sign is going to be a positive 1/2, and I can go right over to the reciprocal of sine, and it's going to be a positive 2/1 or positive 2. Let's look at the cosine. The cosine is a negative radical 3/2. And its reciprocal, well, first I need to come down here, I need to flip it, And then I need to recognize that I need to put it in proper form. So negative 2 radical 3 over 3. Now, how do we identify the tangent? Tangent is sine divided by cosine. I'm going to move this up a little bit and do my work up here. So sine divided by cosine. So 1/2, and normally I write divided by this quantity. But I know that when I divide sine divided by cosine, I switch division to multiplying, and I take the reciprocal of the second fraction. So the 2's are going to be simplified, and I get 1 over the square root of 3. So forget about it being positive or negative, because we already know that my final answer is going to be negative. 1 over the square root of 3 is the correct answer, but it's not in proper form. So to put it in proper form, it's going to be 1 square root of 3 over 3. How did I do that? I take the square root of 3, this is a shortcut, I put it on top, and then I write the value on the bottom without the square root. So this was not mathematically wrong, it just wasn't in proper form. What is the reciprocal of the tangent? You can see it has the same sign, and if I take this original value and I take the reciprocal, it would be the square root of 3 over 1. Find 300 degrees. 300 degrees is one of those measurements, those common measurements that we're working with in this lesson. 30, 60, it's positive, I'm going up. 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 121, 140, 170, and here is 300. So it stops in quadrant 4, all-star trig class. C represents cosine. So cosines are going to be positive, and their reciprocals, secant, everything else will have a negative value to it. Let's get started. We can see that the sign is going to be negative radical 3 over 2, negative radical 3 over 2. We can see that at 300 degrees, we have a cosine of 1/2. And now let's take the reciprocals. So reciprocal of sine would be, no, this would not be in proper form because it would look like negative 2 over square root of 3. So I need to write it in proper form, negative 2 radical 3 over 3. And I take the reciprocal of 1/2, and I get positive 2 over 1, or simply positive 2. Tangent is going to be sine divided by cosine. So sine divided by cosine. Division is going to switch to multiplying, and I take the reciprocal of the second fraction. We can see that the 2's will be simplified to 1, and I'm left with the square root of 3 over 1, or simply the square root, negative square root of 3. When I take the reciprocal, I'd have negative 1 over the square root of 3. Mathematically not wrong, but it's not in proper form. So negative 1 radical 3 over 3. I would like you to press pause, and I'd like you to try to fill out each one of these 6 areas. First, start by locating where is negative 1050. Then decide what should be the sign for each of the 6 trig functions before identifying their value. Come back and press play once you've completed this process. How do we locate negative 1050? Well, I'm going to forget about it being negative, and I want to figure out where does it land on the unit circle. So I'm just going to take 1050, and I'm going to subtract 360. Okay, there's 1 revolution, but I'm going to subtract 360 again. That's 2 revolutions. So I know that this is equivalent to negative 360 plus negative 360 plus negative 330. Okay, here we go. Negatives, I'm going to reverse it. There's 1 revolution, 360. There's another, that's another 360, and now we're going to land way over here, right here at negative 330. That's the same location as 30 degrees. So it lands in quadrant 1. All-star trig class tells me that all things are positive. At 30 degrees, you can see we have a sine of 1/2 and a cosine of radical 3 over 2. Reciprocal is going to be 2 over 1, and this would be 2 over radical 3. Again, mathematically correct, but not in the correct form. How do we figure out the tangent? I'm going to take the sine and divide it by the cosine. Sine divided by cosine. So 1/2 remains, and I flip 2 radical 3, and I end up with 1 over the square root of 3. Mathematically correct, but not in the correct form. And now the reciprocal of tangent, I'm able to take this original value before I put it in the correct form and simply take the reciprocal of it. One last example, negative 270. All right, I'm going to switch the directions. There's 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270. So I'm going 3/4 around the wrong way. This is where I'm landing. So this position is like 90 degrees. What is the sine? The sine is 1, also written as 1 over 1. What is the cosine? It's 0, also written as 0 over 1. Okay, so we can see that we have 0 is neither positive or negative, but we do have a positive sign, and 0 again is neither positive or negative. So I know if sine is positive, its reciprocal will be positive. So the reciprocal of 1 over 1 is just 1 over 1. The reciprocal of cosine, the secant would be 1 over 0. We can never have 0 on the bottom of a fraction, which makes this undefined. How do I figure out the tangent? Tangent is sine divided by cosine. So 1 over 1, switch division to multiplying, and take the reciprocal, which is 1 over 0. Now when you multiply straight across. So 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times 0 is 0, and again I get undefined because I'd end up with 1 over 0. Now when I take the reciprocal for cotangent, 1 over 0 becomes 0 over 1, which is equivalent to simply 0. So 1, 0, undefined, 1, undefined, and 0.